number 4 is Galarian Zapdos 5 from the Chilling Reign expansion. This card became popular due to its ability, Fighting Instinct, which lowers its attack cost by 1 colorless energy for each of your opponent's Pokémon 5 in play. This works well with its attack, Thunderous Kick, which costs 1 fighting and 3 colorless energy to deal 170 damage and discard a special energy from the opponent's active Pokémon before dealing damage. Its efficiency with just 1 fighting energy and fighting typing allowed it to knock out many fighting weak Pokémon at the time, like Eternatus VMAX and Arceus V-Star. Ditto 5 helped recycle Zapdos 5 for repeat knockouts, making it effective in trades with Arceus V-Star decks. And number 3 is Empoleon 5 from the Battle Styles expansion. Previously underused, it gained value with the release of Comfey from Lost Origin. Its ability, Emperor's Eyes, disables the abilities of all non-rulebox Pokémon while it is active. Combined with its attack, Swirling Slice, which deals 130 damage and moves an energy to a benched Pokémon, it becomes a strong counter to decks relying on cards like Comfey and Cramorant. Though opponents might knock out Empoleon V and continue setting up, Ditto V can bring it back into play to keep the pressure on and slow the opponent down. At number 2 is Arceus 5, known for its versatility. Its first attack, Trinity Charge, costs 2 colorless energy and lets you search your deck for 3 energy cards to attach to your benched Pokémon V. The second attack, Power Edge, costs 3 colorless and deals 130 damage. Arceus 5 evolves into Arceus V-Star, a keycard in many decks. If Arceus 5 is knocked out, Ditto 5 allows you to transform into another Arceus 5 to continue your strategy. It effectively lets you run more than 4 copies of Arceus 5 and recover key attackers that were knocked out or discarded earlier. At number 1 is Drapion V from the Lost Origin expansion, not to be confused with the one from Vivid Voltage. Drapion V features the Wild Style ability, reducing its attack cost by 1 colorless energy for each single, rapid, or fusion strike Pokémon your opponent has. Its attack, Dynamic Tail, deals 190 damage to the opponent's active Pokémon and 60 to one of your own. Its dark typing makes it a perfect counter to Mew VMAX, which is weak to dark. Because Mew VMAX decks use all fusion strike Pokémon, Drapion V can attack for free and is highly effective. Ditto V allows you to reuse Drapion V for a second knockout on Mew VMAX, helping secure the final prize cards. Delta Species Pokémon were a unique mechanic featuring familiar Pokémon with unusual types, such as a Metal-type Pikachu. These Pokémon often had synergy with each other. At number 10 is Chimecho from EX Holon Phantoms. It had a simple attack, but stood out due to its Delta Support Poképower, which let you return a basic energy or Delta Rainbow energy from your discard to your hand once per turn, provided you had a Holon supporter card next to your active Pokémon. This versatile card allowed players to search their deck for any card and add it to their hand without revealing it to the opponent. It was included in the maximum amount in nearly every deck due to its flexibility. This rule still applies to current standard legal cards like Arceus V-Star, which can use its ability to search for any 2 cards once per game due to the V-Star power rule. The card's utility made it valuable in any format where it was allowed, whether it was to remove energy from an opposing Pokémon using Super Energy Removal, bring a benched Pokémon into the active spot with Gust of Wind, or reset your hand using Professor Oak via computer search. When Ace-Spec cards were introduced in Generation 5's Black and White era, computer search was reprinted as 1, limiting its use to a single copy per deck and preventing players from using other powerful Ace-Spec cards like Dowsing Machine, which retrieved trainer cards, Life Dew, which reduced prize loss, or Scoop Up Cyclone, which returned a Pokémon and all attached cards to your hand. While computer search enabled powerful plays, it wasn't the core reason those plays existed, which places it lower in the ranking. Next, at number 7, are Rocket's Sneak Attack and Rocket's Trap. Rocket's Sneak Attack lets you view your opponent's hand, and if there are trainer cards, shuffle one back into their deck. Rocket's Trap requires a coin flip and, on heads, shuffles 3 random cards from the opponent's hand into their deck. These cards were often played together in hand control strategies, while Rocket's sneak attack debuted in the Team Rocket set and was used for gaining hand knowledge and planning plays. Rocket's trap was introduced in the Gym Heroes set and enabled full hand control with the help of Imposter Oak's Revenge, which discarded a card and had your opponent shuffle their hand and draw 4 new cards. The strategy started with using Erica to draw cards for both players, then Imposter Oak's Revenge would reset the opponent's hand. Rocket's sneak attack could reduce it to 3 cards, and Rocket's trap could bring it down to 0. Computer search and item finder helped repeat the combo if early attempts failed. While many players used Wigglytuff's Do the Wave attack to finish games quickly, others used Jungle Mankey to peek at the top card of their deck to avoid drawing recovery cards like Bill or Professor Oak. At number 6 is Jungle Lickitung, a basic colorless type Pokemon with 2 attacks. The first, Tongue Whip, does 10 damage and may paralyze the opponent's Pokemon with a coin flip. The second, Supersonic, may cause confusion with a coin flip. While confusion today causes 30 damage if the Pokemon hits itself after a failed coin flip, back then it only did 20 damage but also interfered with retreating. A confused Pokemon had to pay its retreat cost and then flip a coin if heads. It could retreat, but if tails, the energy was discarded and the retreat failed. This made Lickitung a strong option for stall strategies, as paralysis could stop attacks and confusion could prevent both attacks and retreating. Few players ran Switch at the time, making it hard to counter Lickitung's disruption. The only drawback for Leon at the time was its weakness to fighting types. Hitmonchan, a key card in the Haymaker strategy, dealt 20 damage with 1 fighting energy, doubled to 40, due to Leon's weakness. However, in the same set, Scyther was introduced, giving Leon a solid counter to fighting types due to its negative 30 resistance, paired with support cards like Pokémon Center, which fully heals your team at the cost of discarding all energy, and Scoop Up, which lets you return a basic Pokémon to your hand, discarding all attachments. Leon became a strong foundation for a deck. At number 5, there's a 3-way tie between Hitmonchan, Electabuzz, and Scyther Central cards in the Haymaker strategy. Each served a similar purpose but in different types. Hitmonchan, a basic fighting type, had 2 attacks: Jab, 20 damage for 1 fighting energy, and Special Punch, 40 damage with 2 fighting and 1 colorless energy. Electabuzz, the basic lightning type, had Thunder Shock, 10 damage with a chance to paralyze, and Thunder Punch, 30 damage, plus a coin flip for 10 more to the opponent or 10 to itself. Scyther, a basic grass type, had Swords Dance, boosting its next slash to 60, and slash 30 damage for 3 colorless energy. All 3 had 70 horsepower, were basics, and fit well with strong cards like Energy Removal and Super Energy Removal, which dominated the meta. These Pokemon could attack quickly and maintain energy tempo. Scyther was often used as the pivot due to its 0 retreat cost, giving players flexibility to switch into Hitmonchan or Electabuzz as needed. Hitmonchan handled threats like Leon and Wigglytuff, while Electabuzz countered decks like Rain Dance, centered around Blastoise Stage 2 with an ability that let players attach unlimited water energy. Together, this trio covered most threats in the base set, jungle, and fossil formats. However, one promo card outshined them all: Promo Mewtwo, distributed at the premiere of Pokémon, the first movie in late 1999. Mewtwo, a basic psychic type, had energy absorption, attached 2 energy from the discard pile to Mewtwo, and Psyburn, 40 damage for 2 psychic and 1 colorless. It was similar to Electabuzz and Hitmonchan, but had the advantage of recovering from energy removal by pulling energy from the discard. This made it aggressive early on, and a strong answer to both Hitmonchan and Electabuzz. It could also KO Scyther in 2 turns, which few non-Wigglytuff decks could do at the time. Mewtwo also synergized well with Wigglytuff, covering the deck's fighting type weakness and helping push Haymaker decks out of the meta prior to the power shift introduced by Team Rocket, Gym Heroes, and Gym Challenge. At number 3 is Bill, a trainer card that lets you draw 2 cards. Bill boosts consistency by helping decks access crucial cards like Energy, Basic Pokemon, Evolutions, and Utilities. Running 4 copies effectively reduces your deck to 56 cards, increasing your chances of drawing what you need. In other games, This effect is known as a +1 for improving hand advantage, replacing itself, and giving one extra card. Bill is easy to play unless trainer cards are locked, making it a staple for improving deck performance. In card games, having the ability to respond instantly during an opponent's turn is powerful. In Yu-Gi-Oh!, quick effects on monsters, spells, and traps allow this kind of interaction. However, in Pokémon, options are more limited, with deck thinning being a key utility. This made the card, Bill, which simply lets you draw 2 cards, a staple during its legality due to its efficiency. At number 2 is Professor Oak, a trainer card that lets you discard your hand and draw 7 new cards. Its straightforward but strong effect made it a core part of nearly every deck, significantly improving consistency by granting access to more resources. Early in the game, during the base set, jungle, and fossil eras, discarding your hand was seen as risky, especially with deck out being a common threat. But with the release of the movie promo Mewtwo and synergy with discard-heavy strategies, Professor Oak became even more essential, often appearing in triple copies per deck. It also played a critical role in Trapper decks, helping to rapidly cycle through cards to find key disruption tools and necessary energy. Despite the cost of discarding your entire hand, several cards could recover lost resources. Item Finder allowed players to discard 2 cards to retrieve any trainer from the discard pile, enabling repeated use of cards like Professor Oak, Bill, or Energy Removal. Energy Retrieval let players discard 1 card to get back 2 basic energy, which supported a wide variety of decks across different types. Nightly Garbage Run from Team Rocket allowed players to shuffle 3 Pokémon or energy cards back into the deck, and with cards like Computer Search or Item Finder, these resources could be retrieved when needed. The lasting impact of Professor Oak's effect is reflected in the modern Professor's Research card, which has the same effect but as a supporter, meaning only 1 can be played per turn. This limitation keeps the power level in check, showing just how influential the original was. At number 1 are Energy Removal and Super Energy Removal. These trainer cards disrupted opponents by discarding energy. The first removed 1 energy from the opponent with no cost, while the second allowed you to remove 2 at the cost of discarding 1 from your own Pokémon. These cards made it nearly impossible for most Pokémon requiring 3 energy to attack effectively, with few exceptions like Wigglytuff and Mewtwo. Since their removal from standard format in 2001, these cards have never been reprinted in their original form due to their power. Modern variants like Energy Removal 2, Crushing Hammer, Enhanced Hammer, and Lost Remover introduced coin flips or restrictions to balance their effects. Today, guaranteed energy removal is rare in design philosophy. As of late 2022, only Crushing Hammer remained in the standard format, set to rotate in 2023. Though frustrating for opponents, these cards define the strategic landscape of the first generation, making energy management critical. They forced players to think carefully about resource use, earning them the top spot due to how significantly they shaped gameplay. Special energy cards can offer unique effects or provide more than 1 unit of energy, but players are only allowed to attach 1 energy card manually per turn. This list highlights the most impactful special energy cards used in the Pokémon standard formats over the years. At number 10 is Double Dragon Energy, which can only be attached to Dragon-type Pokémon and provides 2 of any type of energy, but only 2 total at a time. Although Dragon types were introduced later in the game, this card was highly valuable, especially when used with strong attackers like Mega Rayquaza EX. For example, Giratina EX's Chaos Wheel attack required 2 Grass, 1 Psychic, and 1 colorless energy. Double Dragon Energy helped meet these requirements efficiently, especially when combined with Max Elixir for additional energy attachments. This strategy contributed to a junior division win at the 2016 World Championships. However, since Double Dragon Energy was limited to 1 specific role, it ranks lower on this list. At number 9 is Boost Energy. This card provides 3 units of colorless energy, but only for evolved Pokémon and only for a single turn, as it must be discarded at turn's end. Despite these limitations, It saw heavy use in decks like Gardevoir EX, which needed 1 Psychic and 3 colorless energy for its Psystorm attack and attack, that deals 10 damage per energy in play, not per card. This distinction made boost energy especially powerful in mirror matches. Some other decks, like Aquapluff Executor, also used it, but the drawbacks kept it from ranking higher. Number 8 is Double Turbo Energy, DTE, which gives 2 colorless energy at the cost of reducing the Pokémon's damage output by 20. Since its release in Brilliant Stars, it has seen widespread play in many competitive decks, including those featuring Zoroark V-Star, Arceus 5, and Mew VMAXor, of which benefit from having colorless attack costs. At the 2022 PR Regional Championships, DTE was included in 4 copies per deck in 21 of the top 50 lists. Despite being relatively new, it has consistently appeared in top-tier strategies. At number 7 is Rainbow Energy. This card provides 1 unit of any type of energy but deals 10 damage to the Pokémon it's attached to. Its value lies in its flexibility, allowing decks with multiple types of Pokémon to run more smoothly by reducing reliance on drawing specific types of basic energy. Originally printed in the Team Rocket set, Rainbow Energy was used in early strategies like Rainmaker, which featured versatile attackers such as Promo, Mewtwo and Hitmonchan to exploit weaknesses. While it only provides 1 energy, its utility has kept it relevant through multiple formats, including the Heart Gold and Soul Silver era. Do you like this personality? Rainbow Energy was designed for powerful decks dating back to the EX Ruby and Sapphire era. It deals 10 damage times the total number of energy attached to both your active Pokémon and the opponent's, reducing the drawback of double Rainbow Energy. This continued through to Diamond and Pearl, supporting attacks like Aqua Jet by turn 2 when combined with Water Energy and a rare Candy evolution from Piplup. One of the most successful decks using Double Rainbow was a Nidoqueen and Pidgeot-based strategy that won the 2005 World Championship. Nidoqueen's attack did 40 damage plus 10 more for each evolved Pokémon on your bench, while Pidgeot's ability allowed consistent deck searches, making for a reliable engine. However, Double Rainbow wasn't ideal for Stage 1 and Stage 2 strategies, as another energy card slightly outperformed it. At number 3 is Scramble Energy. This card typically provides 1 colorless energy, but if you're behind on prizes, it gives 3 energy of any type, only for evolved Pokémon. Its real strength was in enabling sudden power plays without requiring many resources, especially for Stage 1 and Stage 2 decks. During its time in the format, players had to carefully time prize trades to avoid triggering this comeback mechanism. One notable deck that used it was based on Delta Raichu and Delta Executor, which countered decks reliant on abilities and won the US National Championship in 2006. Another strong strategy was built around Electrode's attack, which knocked itself out to attach 5 energy from the discard pile to your Pokémon. This gave the opponent a prize lead, activating Scramble Energy and setting up multiple threats at once. Even into the Diamond and Pearl era, it stayed relevant when paired with Gardevoir and Gallade from Secret Wonders, powering big attacks and locking the opponent out of using abilities. In stalemates, decks included cards like Gardevoir X, whose Shield Beam attack blocked abilities on benched Pokémon, forcing knockouts and further fueling Scramble Energy to shift the game's momentum. At number 2 is Cool Energy. This card provided 1 colorless energy, and if attached to the active Pokémon, allowed you to search your deck for 2 basic Pokémon and put them on your bench, ending your turn. From 2008 to 2011, it was used in nearly every deck because supporters couldn't be played on the first turn, limiting options. Despite ending your turn, Cool Energy enabled strong early plays, often surpassing popular supporters like Celio's Network or Bebe's Search in early game utility. It was particularly helpful when going first since you couldn't attack anyway, minimizing the downside. While its value dropped later in matches, it still met the colorless requirement found in many key attackers of the time, such as Mewtwo LV, X, Machamp from Stormfront, and others from the Secret Wonders expansion. Rainbow Energy was designed for strong competitors starting from the EX, Ruby and Sapphire era. It dealt 10 damage for each energy card attached to both your Pokémon and the opponent's active Pokémon, helping to offset the minor drawback of double Rainbow Energy. This continued into the Diamond and Pearl era, where it could fully power an Aqua Jet attack by the second turn when combined with a water energy and a rare candy to evolve Piplup. One of the most successful decks to use Double Rainbow was a Nidoqueen and Pidgeot strategy that won the 2005 World Championship. Nidoqueen's Power Lariat attack, which used 1 fighting and 2 colorless energy, did 40 damage plus 10 for each evolved Pokemon on your side, while Pidgeot's ability allowed you to search for any card each turn, creating a reliable setup loop. However, for Stage 1 and Stage 2 strategies, another energy card outperformed Double Rainbow Scramble Energy. Scramble Energy provided 1 colorless energy under normal conditions, but if you had more prize cards remaining than your opponent, it supplied 3 energy of any type in any combination, though only for evolved Pokemon. This made it very effective in Stage 1 and the 2nd of December KS, as it could suddenly power up any benched attacker. During the years it was legal, players had to carefully time their prize taking to avoid triggering its effect. One notable deck using this was based on Delta Raichu and Delta Exeggutor, which relied on Pokepowers. Scramble Energy allowed sudden comebacks and helped that deck win the US National Championship in 2006. Another powerful deck enabled by this energy was a strategy featuring Electrode's attack that let it knock itself out to attach 5 energy from the discard pile to your Pokemon, activating Scramble Energy and powering multiple threats at once. Even into the Diamond and Pearl era, Scramble Energy remained strong when paired with certain Pokemon from Secret Wonders, powering up their top attacks and disrupting the opponent's poke powers. To break stalemates, another Pokemon was used to disable opposing poke powers with an attack called Shield Beam, which forced knockouts and pushed the opponent to spend more resources. This tipped the prize exchange in your favor. At number 2 is Cool Energy, which provided 1 colorless energy. If the Pokemon it was attached to was active, you could search for 2 basic Pokemon to place on your bench, ending your turn. This card was a staple in nearly every deck from 2008 to 2011, especially because supporter cards couldn't be played on the first turn. It allowed the first player to establish a strong setup without relying on supporters. Despite ending your turn, it often acted as the final move anyway, reducing the downside. While less useful later in the game, it still provided valuable energy for attackers that needed colorless in their cost, such as Mewtwo level X, Stormfront Machamp, and others. Galade is just one example, even though it can remove benched Pokemon like Boltoy used for cosmic power. Playdol is often played for drawing cards or as a basic Pokemon that supports your main attacker, but it's not the strongest special energy card due to only being printed once. At number 1 is Double Colorless Energy. This card is simple yet extremely powerful, providing 2 units of colorless energy with a single attachment. Gaining 2 energy from one card was a significant advantage in the early days of the game, especially since it was the only card offering multiple energy units until Miracle Energy was introduced 3 years later in the Neo Destiny expansion. First released in the base set, and commonly known as DCE, it supported many strategies of its time. Charizard, for instance, could use it to fuel its Fire Spin attack in just 2 turns, with the help of its Energy Burn ability. Chansey could use one for its move, Scrunch, which could prevent all effects including damage with a coin flip, or 2 to use Double Edge, a high damage move that could knock out popular Pokemon like Scyther, Electabuzz, and Hitmonchan. DCE wasn't limited to the base set, it was reprinted in multiple sets, including Heart Gold and Soul Silver, Next Destinies, XY base set, Phantom Forces, Fates Collide, Evolutions, Sunday and Moon base set, and Guardians Rising. It was played in every format it appeared in and featured in at least one World Championship winner's deck every year it was legal for standard play from 2010 to 2018. These decks reflect top-tier strategies across all divisions. DCE's ability to break the 1 energy per turn rule by providing 2 made it a staple in competitive play for nearly a decade, earning its place at the top of this list. Ditto V is a Pokemon with a unique V transformation ability, allowing it to switch with another Pokemon V from your discard pile. This opened the door to many creative and flexible combinations. At number 10 is Vikavolt 5 from the Darkness Ablaze expansion. It's a 210 horsepower lightning type basic Pokemon with 2 attacks, the main one being Paralyzing Bolt. This attack costs 1 lightning and 1 colorless energy, does 50 damage, and stops your opponent from playing item cards on their next turn. Item lock has always been strong in the game, with past cards like Seismitoad EX and Trevenant showing success with similar effects. Vikavolt 5 also benefits from its lightning typing, making it effective against Pokemon like Palkia V-Star, which has a weakness to lightning, giving Vikavolt a favourable matchup against a top-tier deck. The strategy with Vikavolt 5 is to repeatedly use Paralyzing Bolt, and Ditto 5 allows you to bring it back after it's knocked out to continue disrupting your opponent's plays and wearing down their Pokemon. At number 9 is Raichu V from the Brilliant Stars expansion. It's a 200 horsepower lightning type basic Pokemon with 1 attack, Lightning Rondo. This move deals 20 damage plus an extra 20 for each benched Pokemon on both sides. Its lightning typing makes it capable of knocking out powerful threats like Palkia V-Star in 1 hit. It also has the Fleet-Footed ability, which lets you draw 1 card each turn while it's in the active spot, similar to Suicune 5 and Entei 5. Though the card draw seems minor, it's a valuable advantage. Like Vikavolt 5, Raichu V benefits from Lightning's advantage over Palkia V-Star, and because both Raichu and many Palkia decks rely on full benches for maximum damage, Raichu V can easily capitalize on this to deal significant hits. V can deal massive damage due to its advantage over lightning-weak Palo V-Star. Using Ditto 5, you can bring back Raichu V to secure another knockout on Palo V-Star. Ranked 8th is Ninetales 5 from the Rebel Clash expansion, a notable card with a 9-tailed shapeshifter attack. This move lets you copy the active Pokemon's attack for 1 fire and 2 colorless energy, easily powered up with double turbo energy. It also has Flamethrower, which deals 130 damage and discards 1 energy from the opponent's Pokemon. The main strength of Ninetales 5 lies in the shapeshifter attack, which allows it to copy powerful moves like Trinity Nova from Arceus 5, Stair-enabling Energy Accelerationer, Subspace Swell from Palkia 5 Star, which increases damage based on bench size. Ditto V helps reuse Ninetales V, maintaining pressure if energy can be restored. At number 7 is Unan V from the Silver Tempest expansion. Its first attack, Shady Stamp, deals 30 damage and confuses the opponent's active Pokemon. The second attack, Victory Symbol, costs 3 colorless energy and lets you win the game if you have 1 prize card left. This win condition is powerful if you plan your strategy to reach a single prize remaining. If it gets discarded early, Ditto 5 helps retrieve it, giving consistent access to Victory Symbol when it matters. Ranked 6th is Medicham 5 from the Battle Styles expansion. While it only deals 20 damage with Yoga Loop or 100 with Smash Uppercut, Yoga Loop's effect is its strength. If the 2 damage counters from Yoga Loop knock out a Pokemon, you get another turn. This allows reuse of abilities like Quick Shooting and the ability to play a second supporter card. You can also evolve Pokemon that were benched the previous turn. Ditto 5 supports this combo by retrieving Medicham 5 when needed. In 5th place is Galarian Moltres V from the Chilling Reign expansion, a versatile card with 220 horsepower, a strong ability, and a good attack. Its Dire Flame Wings ability lets you attach a darkness energy from your discard pile to it once per turn. Its Aura Burn attack, costing 2 darkness and 1 colorless energy, deals 190 damage while doing 30 to itself. It pairs well with Ditto V through Energy Switch, allowing you to move the energy to another Pokemon. This setup can support various attackers in different scenarios, with Galarian Moltres 5 powering them, and Ditto 5 ensuring you can retrieve whichever attacker is needed. Is this conversation helpful so far? Sounds like a perfect combination. At number 4 is Galarian Zapdos 5 from the Chilling Reign expansion. This card gained popularity due to its powerful ability, Fighting Instinct, which reduces its attack cost by 1 colorless energy for each Pokemon 5 the opponent has in play. This pairs well with its attack, Thunderous Kick, which costs 1 fighting and 3 colorless energy to deal 170 damage and discard a special energy from the opponent's active Pokemon before doing any damage. It became popular because it could attack efficiently for just 1 fighting energy, and as a fighting type, it could easily knock out many fighting weak Pokemon like Eternatus, VMAX, and Arceus variants. Ditto V allowed players to reuse Galarian Zapdos to score multiple knockouts on Eternatus VMAX and help trade knockouts effectively against Arceus decks. At number 3 is Empoleon V from the Battle Styles expansion. Initially overlooked, it became a strong option after the release of Comfey from Lost Origin. Empoleon V has the strong ability Emperor's Eyes and the attack Swirling Slice, which does 130 damage and moves an energy to a benched Pokémon. The ability disables all abilities of non-rule box Pokémon while Empoleon is active, making it very effective against Comfey and Cramorant cards in any Lost Zone engine deck. This ability slows the setup and pressure of Lost Zone decks. Although the opponent may still knock out Empoleon V and continue their strategy, Ditto V allows players to bring it back and keep applying disruption. At number 2 is Arceus V, known for its versatility and 2 useful attacks. Trinity Charge, which attaches 3 energy to benched 5 Pokémon for 2 colorless energy, and Power Edge, dealing 130 damage for 3 colorless energy. It evolves into the powerful Arceus V-Star. The main goal in Arceus V-Star decks is to evolve by the second turn. Ditto V helps by transforming into Arceus V after 1 turn in play, essentially giving players more than 4 potential copies in their deck and letting them recover knocked out or discarded attackers. At number 1 is Drapion V from the Lost Origin expansion, not to be confused with the version from Vivid Voltage. Drapion V features a strong ability, Wild Style, reducing its attack cost by 1 colorless energy for each single strike, rapid strike, or fusion strike Pokémon the opponent has in play. Its attack, Dynamic Tail, deals 190 damage to the opponent's active Pokémon and 60 to one of your own. Being a Dark type makes it a perfect counter to Mew VMAX due to its weakness to Dark. Since Mew VMAX decks use all Fusion Strike Pokémon, Drapion 5 can attack for free with enough targets in play. It's the best counter to Mew VMAX thanks to its ability, typing, and damage output. Ditto V allows players to bring Drapion V back to secure another knockout and finish the game. Delta species Pokémon introduced a unique mechanic, offering alternate typings like a Metal-type Pikachu and other synergies. This list highlights some of the strongest among them. At number 10 is Chimecho from EX Holon Phantoms. It's a simple card with an unremarkable attack, but it stands out due to its Delta support Poke power, which lets players return a basic energy or Delta Rainbow energy from the discard pile to their hand once per turn. As long as a Holon supporter is next to the active Pokémon, you are only allowed to include one of this card in your entire deck, but it came with the promise of very powerful attacks, Poke, Powers, and Poke Bodies. While many Pokémon Star cards didn't live up to that promise, M-Star certainly did. Both of its attacks were strong, but the most commonly used was Rainbow Wave, which let you pick a basic energy type attached to M-Star and deal 20 damage to all of your opponent's Pokémon of that type. This attack saw major play in 2 different decks, during its time in competitive play, each using it differently. The first was the Argon deck in 2007, which included multiple basic energy types to make Rainbow Wave effective against many strategies. The other was Andalon decks in 2008, which used the card mainly to spread damage in mirror matches. M-Star's Mimicry attack was also powerful in mirror matches and other scenarios, allowing it to copy any of the opponent's attacks provided the right energy was attached. This was easier to achieve in mirror matches because both players typically used the same types of energy. Mimicry was also occasionally used in the Argon deck, which often included Delta Rainbow energy, allowing M-Star to copy nearly any attack. Although M-Star never won the World Championship in the Master Division, it did make the top 4 and even won the title in the Senior Division, players aged roughly 11-14, in 2008, enough to earn it a spot on this list. At number 6 is Exeggutor from EX Holon Phantoms, which took the other spot in the Argon deck previously mentioned with Raichu. While Raichu's role was more limited, Exeggutor's power came from its Delta Circle attack, dealing 10 damage plus 10 more for each Delta species Pokémon in play, and Split Bomb, which dealt 30 damage to 2 of the opponent's Pokémon. These versatile attacks made Exeggutor a powerful option in 2006 and 2007. In 2007, it even appeared in some Argon deck builds as a fighting type attacker. Because it had more applications and lasted longer in the competitive scene than Raichu, Exeggutor secures the number 6 spot, and number 5 is Metagross from EX Delta Species. Unlike previous entries, Metagross stands out as an elite card. It had a powerful attack and an even more impactful Poké, Power, Delta Control, which let you look at the top 4 cards of your deck and add one to your hand, significantly improving consistency. Metagross was also a dual-type Pokémon, one of the unique traits of Delta Species cards, and often included a Metal type alongside another. In the Meta Knight archetype deck centered on Metagross and Dragonite Aethys Poké, power was crucial to getting out the 4 to 5 Stage 2 Pokémon needed for the deck to function. Metagross also served as the main attacker, with its Crush and Burn attack dealing 30 damage plus 20 more for each energy you discarded from your Pokémon. At the time, such high damage from a non-EX Pokémon was nearly unheard of, helping Meta Knight become one of the top-performing decks in the 2006 and 2007 formats, with strong finishes at both national and world championships. At number 4 is Flygon X from EX Dragon Frontiers. In the late EX era, multiple Flygon cards were extremely powerful, with 2 notable Delta Species versions. While they relied on each other to perform well, Flygon X was the more critical piece in decks that used it. It dominated the 2007 format, mainly due to its Psychic Pulse attack, which did 80 damage and helped spread damage effectively across the board. You could only include one of this card in your entire deck, but it came with a promise of very powerful attacks, Poké, Powers, and Poké Bodies. While many of the Pokémon Star cards didn't live up to that promise, M-Star definitely did. Both of its attacks were strong, but the most commonly used was Rainbow Wave, which let you choose a type of basic energy attached to M-Star and deal 20 damage to all of your opponent's Pokémon of the same type. This card saw major play in 2 different decks during its legal period, each for different reasons. One was a 2007 deck that used a variety of basic energy types, making Rainbow Wave effective against many strategies. The other was a 2008 deck that used the card in mirror matches to spread damage across opposing Pokémon. In those mirror matches, M's Mimicry attack was also valuable, allowing you to copy an opponent's attack if you had the required energy. While this requirement wasn't always easy to meet, it was typically possible in mirror matches since both players used similar energy. Mimicry was also sometimes used in the aforementioned 2007 deck, which ran multiple Delta Rainbow energy, enabling the use of any attack. M never became a world champion in the Master Division, with its highest finish being a top 4, but it did win the title in the Senior Division for players aged roughly 11 to 14 in 2008. Paraphrase the following text into English. Don't mention any personal or channel name. Don't add any comment or suggestion. Just paraphrase. Only one response. Never show 2 responses. In which the player joins up with an ally to take on 2 opponents. There's only one instance in Emerald where the player teams up with an NPC to take on 2 other NPCs, and that's when the player is joined by Stephen Stone in a battle against Maxie and Tabitha, presumably due to the team still experimenting with the new feature, and there only being one of this kind in the game. There's a bit of a unique oversight in how the fight can play out during the course of this battle. Stephen's level 42 Metang is able to gain experience points alongside the player's own Pokémon, and there's actually quite a lot of experience up for grabs, enough in fact to level up Stephen's Metang. And this can be done by using Pokémon with moves like Self-Destruct to finish off the opponent's Pokémon, and also ensuring that the player's Pokémon don't gain any experience, and it all goes to Stephen's Metang. Requires a lot of persistence and patience, as demonstrated here by YouTuber Blue Boy Finn. What's unique about this oversight is that it's the only instance in the entire mainline series of Pokemon games where in a non-scripted battle, an NPC's Pokemon is able to not only gain experience, but is also able to level up. And this isn't even the only oversight linked to Stephen that can be found in Pokemon Emerald. There's an optional fight against Stephen in the post-game where he mentions battling alongside the player at the Sopis Space Center. However, the Space Center is in MOS Deep City Whoopsie. We brought up 3D console Pokemon titles earlier, but they were just pretenders, and now it's time for 2 the real deal. Pokémon Colosseum, probably the first legit 3D Pokémon adventure. Most folks watching this video would have played. It's a fairly nostalgic title for us as well. Genius Sonority did a great job developing the game, but we can't give the same praise to those who made the game's user manual. In the game's instruction booklet on page 41, there's a sentence that mentions a move that is otherwise never seen. Self-revive. Not only does this move for a start not exist in the game, it doesn't exist in any Pokemon game, and on top of that we're pretty certain, finally, and number 1 is Rayquaza X from EX Delta Species. With strong attacks and an even stronger Pokebody, Rayquaza X stands out among Delta Species Pokemon. Its first attack, Delta Circuit, deals 30 damage to any opponent's Pokemon for just 1 lightning and 1 colorless energy, or 50 if the target has a Pokepower or Pokebody. Its second attack does 70 damage for 2 lightning and 2 colorless energy, but is rarely used, thanks to its Poke, Body, Rage Aura. All colorless energy costs are removed if you have more prize cards remaining than your opponent, making both attacks highly efficient. It was used in several decks, including a 2007 World Championship winning one. In the EX era format popular in Japan, and now revisited by many, it remains a centerpiece in a top-tier deck known as Argon. Its short-lived dominance secured Rayquaza X's position as the best Delta Species Pokemon. Item cards are the most flexible cards, as there is no limit to how many you can play each turn, unlike Stadium or Supporter cards, which are limited to 1 per turn. This includes all unrestricted trainer cards from before the Black and White era, with the exception of Ace Specs, which will be discussed in a different context. In 10th place is a card with a unique use, though the concept has existed since the base set. Lily's Pokédoll from Cosmic Eclipse can be played like a Pokémon, but when it's knocked out, the opponent doesn't take any prize cards. This can be highly useful in turns where the opponent can't target benched Pokémon, or even as a full strategy involving repeatedly recycling Pokédolls to prevent the opponent from winning by taking 6 prizes. It was often paired with Florges from Forbidden Light, which had the wondrous gift, ability allowing you to flip a coin and, if heads, place an item card on top of your deck. Since this wasn't restricted to once per turn, multiple Florges could increase the chances of retrieving a Pokédoll to play again. This wasn't the first card of its kind. Clefairy Doll from the base set was the original item that acted like a Pokémon in play without giving up prize cards. Unlike Lily's Pokédoll, it couldn't be affected by special conditions, though this rarely mattered due to its 10 horsepower. Robo Substitute from Phantom Forces followed, offering 30 horsepower like Lily's Pokédoll and being susceptible to special conditions. The key difference with Lily's Pokédoll was that it could be returned to the bottom of the deck instead of being discarded, a small but significant advantage for a disruptive card. There was also a similar category of item card Pokémon in the form of fossils before the Diamond and Pearl era. These fossil cards used to evolve certain Pokémon, also didn't give up prize cards. In 2004, a deck featured Ninjask from Dragon, alongside multiple copies of Claw Fossil, Root Fossil, and Mysterious Fossil. Ninjask's quick touch attack allowed it to deal 30 damage and switch with a benched Pokemon, forcing opponents to get through up to 12 fossils before taking a prize, possibly leading to the change where fossils began yielding prizes. A crucial part of playing the Pokemon TCG is accessing needed cards. Luxury Ball could search the deck for any Pokemon, but with a unique restriction. It could only be played if there wasn't another copy already in the discard pile. This didn't stop players from including multiple copies in a deck, but ensured they couldn't be reused in the same game. Energy cards are typically abundant, but due to deck limits of 4 per card name, it can be hard to find specific Pokemon. Search cards help with this, starting with Pokeball from Jungle, which searched for any Pokemon on a successful coin flip. Many search cards have appeared since, often modeled after Pokeballs from the video games, all with limitations. Ultra Ball required discarding 2 cards. Level Ball only searched for Pokemon with 90 horsepower or less. Quick Ball searched only for basic Pokemon and required a discard. Despite their restrictions, some, like Luxury Ball, remained powerful enough to be widely used. Eventually, Luxury Ball was replaced by more universally usable item search cards, like Master Ball reprinted in Plasma. Some players still recognized how strong Versus Seeker was, and included a copy in their decks to reuse older supporter cards. A few years later, Versus Seeker received its first reprint in the 2009 set Supreme Victors. However, this reprint didn't see much play, because most supporters at the time were used primarily for setting up Pokémon to use their Poké Powers or Poké Bodies, and players rarely ran out of supporters or needed to reuse them. Even so, some decks included one or two copies to occasionally reuse specific supporters or improve consistency. It wasn't until its third printing that the power of Versus Seeker was fully realized. In 2014, it returned in Phantom Forces, and its effectiveness was immediately apparent due to major changes in the game. Most decks were running the same 3 core supporters, one that let you discard your hand and draw 7 cards, one that shuffled both players' hands into the deck and drew cards equal to the number of prize cards left, and one that let you switch an opponent's benched Pokémon with their active one. Typically, each of these supporters was played in sets of 4, and Versus Seeker gave players additional access to them, which was particularly useful in situations where a player had a small hand due to an opponent's disruption. Another key reason Versus Seeker became so strong was the introduction of Battle Compressor in the same set. Battle Compressor is often regarded as one of the best item cards ever printed. It allowed players to discard up to 3 cards from their deck, which was extremely beneficial for strategies involving the discard pile. This synergy let players run many one-off supporters and still access them reliably through Versus Seeker. Battle Compressor also allowed players to discard unnecessary supporters against certain matchups, improving deck efficiency. Even without Battle Compressor, Versus Seeker helped include tech cards that only needed to be used once or twice, giving players more creativity and flexibility in building decks. Versus Seeker also received a secret rare reprint in Roaring Skies, extending its time in standard play. During its third lifespan, it was a staple in nearly every deck. If it ever returned, it's likely many decks would again include 4 copies. At number 5 is Item Finder, a card that lets you discard 2 cards to retrieve any trainer card from your discard pile. With half the list covered, we move into cards that are unlikely to return in their original form due to being too powerful. Item Finder dates back to the base set and was played in nearly every deck at the maximum of 4 copies, proving how strong it was to recover trainer cards. Over a decade later, the Heart Gold and Soul Silver Triumphant set introduced Junk Arm, its spiritual successor. Junk Arm also required you to discard 2 cards but allowed you to retrieve a trainer card. While the effect was similar, changes to card classifications and rules meant that Junk Arm functioned differently. With the introduction of the supporter category, trainer cards were redefined, and effects that applied to trainer cards began to refer only to what are now known as item cards. This change was formalized in the Black and White era, resulting in a complete overhaul of how such recovery cards work. Some players still recognized how strong Versus Seeker was and chose to include a copy in their decks, mainly to reuse non-holo supporter cards that were still in play. A few years later, Versus Seeker received its first reprint in the 2009 Supreme Victors set. However, this reprint came at a time when most supporter cards were used primarily for setting up Pokémon to activate their abilities and gather resources, making it less likely for players to run out of supporters and need to reuse them. Still, some decks found space for 1 or 2 copies to reuse one-off supporters or improve access to key consistency cards after their initial use. Its third printing marked a turning point, as players began to fully understand its value. When it returned in 2014's Phantom Forces set, several factors contributed to its immediate success. First, the game had evolved to where most decks relied on a core trio of supporter cards: Professor's Research, which allowed players to discard their hand and draw 7 cards; N, which shuffled both players' hands into their decks and drew cards equal to their remaining prize cards; and Lysandra, which let players switch an opponent's benched Pokémon with their active one. These were usually played in sets of 4, and Versus Seeker provided extra access to them, which was especially helpful in recovering from disruption caused by cards like N. The second reason for Versus Seeker's rise was the introduction of Battle Compressor in the same set. Battle Compressor, often considered one of the best item cards, let players discard up to 3 cards from their deck. While that might not seem powerful at first, decks that utilize the discard pile could benefit greatly. It allowed players to include one-off supporter cards and easily access them through Versus Seeker, or discard cards not needed in certain matchups. Additionally, it improved deck-building flexibility by enabling the inclusion of specialized tech cards without needing to run multiple copies, allowing decks to adapt and shift matchups. Versus Seeker received another reprint as a secret rare in Roaring Skies, extending its time in the format. Throughout this period, it was a staple in nearly every deck. If it were reintroduced today, many decks would likely return to playing 4 copies. At number 5 is Item Finder, a card that lets you discard 2 cards to retrieve any trainer card from the discard pile. With half the list complete, we're entering the category of cards that are unlikely to return in their original form due to their overwhelming power. Item Finder, originally from the base set, was a staple card used in full sets of 4, highlighting how powerful recovering trainer cards has always been the Pokémon TCG. Over a decade later, in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, Triumphant, it received a spiritual successor in Junk Arm. Junk Arm also required discarding 2 cards to retrieve a trainer card. While the effect seems identical, changes in card terminology meant that Junk Arm only interacted with what are now known as item cards, not all trainer cards. The division into supporters, stadiums, and items and how those terms were applied meant Junk Arm's functionality was different. This shift marked a significant change in how such recovery cards could be used in the game. Trainers were initially categorized together, including supporters, stadiums, and items. When Junk Arm was introduced, it could only retrieve item cards, not supporters or stadiums. Despite this limitation, it was still included in early decks to reuse strong item cards, much like how players used to rely on VS Seeker. It took some time for players to realize how powerful this effect could be, though not as long as it did for VS Seeker. After the release of Black and White, most competitive decks began running 4 copies of Junk Arm, as the format became increasingly reliant on item cards, proving the lasting strength of the Item Finder effect, even in a weaker form. Toward the end of the Black and White era, in Plasma Storm, this effect returned through Dowsing Machine, which could retrieve any type of trainer card. Dowsing Machine has seen significant play since, but it's unlikely that such an item card like Item Finder will be regularly reprinted again. At number 4 is Scoop Up, a card from the base set, similar to a currently legal card. As the name implies, Scoop Up lets you return one of your Pokémon from play to your hand. Notably, it specifies only the basic stage is returned, meaning you must discard attached cards like Tools, Energy, and any evolved stages. While this might not seem remarkable compared to Scoop Up Net, printed in 2019, which lifts all stages except certain Pokémon types like GX or V, context is key. When first released, most decks relied heavily on basic Pokémon, making Scoop Up a valuable option to fully heal weakened Pokémon. Its best pairing was with base set Alakazam, whose power allowed damage to be moved among your Pokémon. Players would transfer damage to high HP Pokémon like Chansey, then use Scoop Up to remove that damage entirely by picking the Pokémon up. To fully grasp the strength of these effects, it's helpful to look at how they evolved. Soon after, Neo Genesis introduced Super Scoop Up, which could return an entire Pokémon line and all attached cards on a successful coin flip. This card remained a regular part of the game up to the Sword and Shield era, where Scoop Up Net replaced it. Though Super Scoop Up saw some play, its reliance on a coin flip made it less consistent and never a true staple. However, the utility of picking up Pokémon remained, with supporter cards like AZ offering a similar effect, returning a Pokémon to hand, while discarding attached cards for healing or reusing abilities. Over time, the game has included more support Pokémon, with powerful one-time abilities triggered when played from hand to bench. Examples include Lapras from Legend Maker, searches for a supporter, Uxie from Legends Awakened, draws until you have 7 cards, and many others over the past 2 decades. These were often paired with Super Scoop Up to repeatedly activate their effects. Scoop Up Net showed how impactful such a card could be in the modern game, becoming key to many decks focused on abilities. Without the restriction of not targeting GX or V Pokémon, every deck would likely run 4 copies to reuse cards like Genesect V, Draws cards, Luminion 5, Searches Supporters, and others. Many of these abilities were purposely attached to V cards to prevent abuse from cards like Scoop Up Net. This text discusses the impact and history of certain powerful cards in the Pokémon trading card game. One example is a card that allowed players to return any Pokémon to their hand, including high HP ones, which was considered too powerful. Such effects may return occasionally, but only with limitations like coin flips. Another example is Gust of Wind, a card that let a player switch one of their opponent's benched Pokémon with their active one. This mechanic became so iconic that any card allowing a similar effect is now called a gusting effect. Over the years, variations like Pokémon Reversal and Pokémon Circulator were introduced. Reversal had the same effect as Gust of Wind, but required a successful coin flip, while Circulator allowed the opponent to choose the switched Pokémon. Despite their drawbacks, these cards had a major impact on the game, particularly in the 2011 World Championship, where decks often included 4 copies of Pokémon Reversal and Junk Arm, making luck a decisive factor in many games. This format is widely regarded as one of the worst in the game's history. Shortly after the 2011 World Championship, the set Emerging Powers introduced Pokémon Catcher, a near-identical version of Gust of Wind. It quickly became a staple in all competitive decks unless they used strategies that blocked item cards. The format became heavily centralized around this card, with many games being decided by who drew it first. Eventually, Pokémon Catcher was changed to include a coin flip requirement, marking one of the few times a card's functionality was officially altered in this way. Since then, most similar effects have appeared only on supporter cards to maintain balance. The second card discussed is energy removal from the base set, which allowed players to discard an energy attached to an opponent's Pokémon. Since players can normally attach only one energy per turn, this could drastically set them back. It was heavily used, especially alongside Item Finder, turning games into long battles of resource denial. An even stronger version, Super Energy Removal, let a player discard one of their own energies to discard 2 from an opponent, leading to decks with up to 12 energy denial options. Like other powerful effects, this mechanic eventually returned with a coin flip condition to limit its strength. Energy Removal 2 was first printed in the Expedition set and was reprinted several times, with its last appearance in Power Keepers, nearly a decade after such effects were introduced. The Diamond and Pearl era saw this type of card take a break until it was reintroduced in the Black and White era, much like Gust of Wind, which returned as Pokémon Catcher in Emerging Powers. Energy Removal 2 returned as Crushing Hammer. A card that showed Pokémon recognized regular energy removal was too strong without a coin flip. Crushing Hammer remains in the game but has never dominated the meta. Nonetheless, it's been consistently used in various decks, particularly in slower, control-focused strategies. If it didn't involve a coin flip, nearly every deck would include 4 copies, similar to how it was during the base set era. Topping the list is the most overpowered item card ever released, Professor Oak from the base set, the 6th such card from that set on the list. It let players discard their hand and draw 7 new cards, and it was especially effective if it was the last card in hand, allowing a full refresh. This mechanic is familiar to players from 2010 to 2022 through cards like Professor Juniper, Professor Sycamore, and Professor's Research, all of which require discarding your hand to draw 7. However, those are supporter cards, meaning you could only use 1 per turn. Despite that limitation, their effect remained extremely strong. Imagine having access to 4 such cards per turn. Using all 4 Professor Oaks meant drawing 28 cards, nearly your entire deck, which was actually possible during its original run. The strength of an item card that draws 7 new cards is unmatched, securing Professor Oak's place at the top of the list. A unique feature of Pokémon SP was that all were basic Pokémon, allowing immediate play and approach later seen with Pokémon EX and Pokémon 5. SB cards were supported by many dedicated trainer and Pokémon cards, making the archetype one of the most successful competitively. At number 10 is Bronzong G, a core card in SP decks that enabled a flexible toolbox style by allowing players to switch between attackers based on the situation. Its Pokepower, Galactic Switch, let you move an energy card from one of your Pokemon to another at the cost of placing 2 damage counters on Bronzong G. This cost was negligible thanks to cards like Poke-Turn and Bronzong's Solid HP. Bronzong was part of the initial SP card lineup, and while not always seen as iconic, it was an essential inclusion in many decks and key to the archetype's success. At number 9 is Ambipom G, a card that may not be widely seen as powerful today but was very impactful at the time. Its snap attack dealt high damage to Pokemon without any energy attached. It also had the Tail Code attack, which moved an energy from the opponent's active Pokemon to another on their bench, helping set up snap attack. This made it ideal for quickly knocking out commonly used support Pokemon like Uxie, Mesprit, and Claydol. Some Pokemon had low HP, so using Crobat G allowed for significant extra damage, which will be discussed later. Picking off these unevolved basic Pokemon was key to disrupting the opponent's setup. Under the TCG rules at the time, players could attack on the first turn even when going first, making it possible to knock out an opponent's Pokemon before they could even draw a card. One major tactic in later SP mirror matches involved Ambipom G knocking out opposing Garchomp C level X using Dragon Rush. By attaching energy gain and a double colorless energy, which would be discarded afterward, Garchomp C would be left with no energy and a double weakness to Ambipom G's snap attack. In 8th place is Dragonite FB, a card that was initially underrated compared to other SP Pokemon. Its attack, Mark Blow, could hit for 80 damage against other SP Pokemon, enough to knock out most regular SP basics, especially with Crobat G's support. Being a colorless type was both helpful and risky. It could take out Garchomp C level X, but was also vulnerable to Garchomp C's Earthquake due to its own weakness. Giant Tail was rarely used, only in desperate situations, but could finish games when needed. Unlike other entries that quickly became part of archetypes, Dragonite FB took time to become integrated into SP strategies. Once it did, it became a major threat and contributed to a 2010 World Championship win. However, because its impact was realized late, it doesn't rank higher on the list. 7th place is a controversial pick Palkia G and its level X form. They aren't often seen as dominant in the SP format because they were past their peak during most of it. However, during the first year after release, they were dominant. When SP cards debuted in the Platinum set, Palkia G was a leading attacker and quickly started winning events. Palkia G level X's Pokepower, Lost Cyclone, forced both players to reduce their bench to 3 Pokemon, sending the rest to the Lost Zone, removing them from play permanently. This limited the opponent's options, or helped remove unwanted cards from one's own bench. Combined with its Hydro Shot attack, it could reduce the opponent's bench to just 2 Pokemon in one turn. Hurl Breath helps set up damage for future knockouts, although later outclassed by Luxray GL level X and Infernape 4 level X. Palkia G level X still performed well in 2009, with its best finish being top 8 in the 2017 World Championships. Despite Luxray GL being a counter, it also became an ally in decks, and the combination reached multiple top 16 finishes in 2009. Palkia G remained relevant until the release of Supreme Victors, when the SP archetype reached its strongest form. In 6th place is Lucario GL, a utility card with a Poke body called Boundary Aura, which changed all Pokemon's weaknesses to ×2. This mechanic, later made standard in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, was initially exclusive to SP Pokemon. Lucario GL turned this feature into an advantage by applying ×2 weakness to opponents, making it easier to handle many top matchups. It turned a minor +30 weakness into a more impactful ×2, giving SP decks an edge in a format where every small gain mattered. As a result, Lucario GL became a staple in nearly every SP deck. Do you like this personality? This card was a powerful offensive force that also offered strategic value when used well. Its main move, Luring Flame, forced the defending Pokemon to switch with one from the opponent's bench and inflicted a burn condition. At that time, burn was a lasting effect, only removable by rotating out of the active spot between turns. When burned, players flipped a coin and tails. Their Pokemon took 20 damage. On heads, nothing happened. Luring Flame was particularly effective against bench support Pokemon like Claydol and Vileplume, forcing them into active positions where they could be eliminated or stuck due to limited retreat options. This set up Garchomp C level X's Dragon Rush to repeatedly deal 80 damage to bench targets, clearing the field. Blaziken FB level X also had the Jet Shoot attack, which did 80 damage for just 2 energy, even one with energy gain. Its Burning Spirit ability added 40 more damage to burned Pokemon, helping to defeat high HP threats. The overall strategy involved bringing out a benched Pokemon with Luring Flame, leaving it burned, then finishing it off. This made Blaziken a strong attacker and a useful addition to SP decks. Next is Dialga G and Dialga G level X, which remained effective over time. It was among the first SP cards used to slow down opponents by blocking item and stadium card use with its Deafen attack and later finishing with Second Strike. It proved especially useful against Vileplume by negating its Allergy Flower ability, which stopped item card play thanks to Dialga G level X's Time Crystal ability. Compared to other SP cards, Dialga G played a slower, more defensive role, aiming to wear down the opponent. Late game strategies featured a single, heavily protected Dialga G with multiple special metal energies to reduce incoming damage and healing support from Pokéturn and Garchomp C level X's Healing Breath to recover damage. Though not the most popular SP variant, it was preferred by top players who favoured a more controlling style. Garchomp C level X, frequently mentioned, was the deck's best attacker. Its Dragon Rush attack allowed players to discard 2 energy to deal 80 damage to any opponent's Pokemon, quickly eliminating most basic and Stage 1 cards, disrupting setups or directly removing threats. With the release of Supreme Victors and later double colorless energy in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, it could attack using just 1 double colorless and an energy gain. Its Healing Breath ability made it even more formidable, restoring damaged Pokemon on the field and extending the usefulness of support cards like Bronzong G. Its colorless type and free retreat cost made it extremely adaptable and dangerous in any SP build. Crobat G ranked next. Similar to how Zigzagoon with Headbutt Tantrum and Scoop Up Net operated years later, Crobat G helped secure knockouts by placing damage counters using its Flash Bite ability. When played, it could place 1 damage counter anywhere on the opponent's board, and with Pokéturn, this could be repeated throughout the match to set up precise damage numbers for knockouts. Flash Bite was one of the most important abilities from 2009 to 2011, and even decks not built around SP strategies often included it with a couple of Cyrus's Conspiracy and Pokéturns to capitalize on its utility. Crobat G was included mainly for its added damage potential and utility against bulky threats like Donphan Prime, which the deck otherwise had trouble handling. Energy requirements weren't an issue, since most SP decks already use Psychic Energy for another common counter, Promo Toxicroak G, often used against Luxray level X. For over a decade, the ability to force an opponent's Pokemon into the active spot has been a central part of the Pokemon TCG. Before cards like Boss's Orders, Cross Switcher, Pokemon Catcher, Lycanroc GX, or Umbreon VMAX existed, Luxray GL level X filled that role. That's why it ranks as not only the top SP card, but also one of the greatest cards of its time perhaps ever. Its Bright Look ability, activated upon evolving, lets you switch one of your opponent's benched Pokemon into the active spot. When combined with Poketurn and multiple Luxray cards, players could repeatedly use this effect to target and knock out low HP Pokemon with attacks like Flash Impact or Trash Bolt. You didn't even need to use Luxray itself for the knockout, or even an SP Pokemon, which made Luxray GL level X a key part of many non-SP decks. Players dedicated over 10 deck slots to include Cyrus's Conspiracy, Poketurn, Luxray GL level X, and SP Radar, just to reliably use Bright Look and control which Pokemon to attack. This was especially useful for decks that struggled to deal enough damage to a main attacker. Luxray GL level X was a powerful finisher. Popular decks that used it included Jumpluff from the Heart Gold and Soul Silver set, and Gyarados from the Stormfront expansion. His dominance doesn't need debate was a key card in World Championship winning decks from 2009 to 2010, playing a main role in one deck and combining with Garchomp C Level X in another. Both cards were reprinted in the 25th anniversary set to honour their legacy. With this kind of power, SP decks stayed at the top as long as they existed. Since the release of the Expedition set in 2002, supporter cards have been essential to the Pokémon TCG, whether by drawing cards, powering Pokémon, or disrupting opponents. At number 10 on the list of top supporters is Colress's Experiment from the Sword and Shield Lost Origin expansion. It's the engine of Lost Zone decks, letting you look at 5 cards, keep 3, and send 2 to the Lost Zone. The goal of these decks is to get at least 10 cards into the Lost Zone, so Sableye can use Lost Mine to spread damage. Other key plays include Cramorant attacking for free with Spit Innocently for 110 damage, and Mirage Gate powering attackers by attaching 2 different energy types once there are 7 cards in the Lost Zone. The deck's main strategies were Comfy's Flower Selecting to help fill the Lost Zone and Colress's Experiment for deeper digging and discarding. A similar card from the Heart Gold and Soul Silver era, Sage's Training, let players choose 2 cards to keep and discard 3, but didn't support a deck designed to benefit from that kind of discard. At number 9 is a card with an attack that arguably should never have existed, L. Any combination of Stadium supporter cards allowed players to regain access to their resources at the cost of their supporter for the turn, making it ideal for slower decks that didn't rely on drawing cards immediately. Instead, it gave them access to important cards for future turns. However, this card had a major design flaw. Its ability to retrieve itself from the discard pile created an infinite loop if 2 copies were in play. Combined with disruptive stadiums and supporter cards, it enabled oppressive strategies that were considered unhealthy for the game. This led to the card being banned in the expanded format, which includes all cards from the Black and White series onward. It has since been unbanned, as other problematic cards have taken its place, reducing its impact. At number 8 is a card called Marnie. It forces both players to place their hands at the bottom of their decks, with the user drawing 5 new cards and the opponent drawing 4. This unique effect differs from past cards that shuffled hands into the deck instead. While this might seem minor, it disrupts strategies that rely on building a hand for future turns, as players must now find a way to shuffle their decks to regain those cards. Though frustrating for the opponent, it creates new strategic opportunities. For example, a Pokémon like Oranguru from Sword and Shield lets a player swap a card from their hand with the top of their deck, which can be powerful in key moments. Marnie can disrupt opponents as early as the first turn and, if not properly anticipated, can shift the momentum of a game. In 7th place is one of the problematic supporter cards previously mentioned, Lieutenant Surge's Strategy. This card allowed the player to use 2 additional supporter cards during the same turn, as long as they had taken fewer prize cards than their opponent. It was intended as a comeback tool, but it became problematic when used in decks that didn't aim to win by taking prize cards, instead focusing on draining the opponent's resources. Initially, it was a niche strategy, but this changed quickly after the release of Reset Stamp just before the 2019 World Championships. Reset Stamp shuffled the opponent's hand into their deck and made them draw cards equal to their remaining prize cards. When combined with Master Supporter that draws 2 cards while discarding 1 from the opponent's hand, players could completely wipe their opponent's hand. Additionally, Chip Chip Ice Axe let players choose the top card of the opponent's deck, creating further control. The release of Jesse and James, which forced both players to discard 2 cards from their hands, made the strategy even faster. While these combinations created viable control decks in standard play, they were far more powerful in the expanded format. Surge was eventually banned alongside other cards that allowed repeated access to these effects, showing just how strong they were together. At number 6 is the oldest card on this list, Steven's Advice. It allowed the player to draw a number of cards equal to the number of Pokémon the opponent had in play, provided they had fewer than 7 cards in hand. Throughout the history of the Pokémon trading card game, certain supporter cards have significantly influenced gameplay and deck construction. One example is a card that allowed players to draw cards based on the number of benched Pokémon they had, offering strong consistency and becoming widely used. Although similar cards have been released, none matched its popularity due to stricter requirements and more competition. Another notable group includes cards that share the same effect, discarding the player's hand to draw 7 new cards. Initially met with skepticism, this mechanic eventually became a staple for fast and aggressive strategies, with multiple versions featuring different characters offering the same powerful draw effect. A particularly dominant archetype-specific card allowed players to attach 2 fire energy cards from their hand and draw 3 cards. This enabled explosive turns and rapid attacks, leading to widespread success in competitive play during a specific tournament season, where decks built around this card frequently faced off in the finals. Another game-changing card gave players the ability to bring any benched Pokémon into the active position. This mechanic allowed for strategic knockouts and stalling tactics, becoming a nearly essential inclusion in competitive decks due to its versatility and lack of drawbacks. Lastly, a group of cards introduced a disruptive effect by forcing both players to shuffle their hands into their decks and redraw a new hand, either based on prize cards or a set number. One of these cards became especially well known for its ability to help players stage comebacks when their opponents had few cards to redraw. These cards played a key role in defining disruption strategies and changed how players approached hand management and card advantage, leaving a lasting impact on the competitive landscape. Is this conversation helpful so far? Afterward, players would draw a number of cards equal to their remaining prize cards, making these both strong draw supporters and effective disruption tools. Early in the game, they were often used to refresh a player's hand and set up their Pokémon strategy. Later, they could reduce the opponent's hand size after they had drawn multiple prize cards. This was especially powerful when the player using them had not yet taken many prize cards, functioning as both a draw engine and a disruptive tactic. While they were legal, these cards were staples in nearly every deck, with few exceptions. Their impact was further recognized when one received a special print in the 25th anniversary set. Even now, many top players continue to call for their return, particularly in stale formats or ones lacking comeback mechanics. Ranked at number 1 is Lissandra's Trump card, which shuffles both players' discard piles back into their decks, excluding any other copies of itself. This effectively reset all used resources and could completely change the course of a match. In theory, it could be played up to 8 times per game if each player had 4 copies, though this became even easier with the item card VS Seeker, which retrieved a supporter card from the discard pile. Because VS Seeker didn't share the same name, it allowed the effect to be reused repeatedly as long as copies were available. Already a staple in most decks, this made it simple to keep resetting the game state. Some decks used it to regain access to key resources, while others cycled through energy removal and healing cards until they secured a win. Initially, this wasn't seen as a problem, since control strategies are a valid approach to the game. The issue arose with the release of Shaman EX, whose setup ability allowed players to draw cards until they had 6 in hand. Since the ability wasn't limited to once per turn and could be reused with cards like Super Scoop Up, which returned Shaman EX to the hand on a coin flip, players developed a strategy to draw their entire deck every turn. They would end their turn by playing Lissandra's Trump card, resetting everything and repeating the process. This proved too powerful and led to the first ban of a supporter card since the early 2000s. It remains banned in the expanded format and is unlikely to ever return, marking it as the most dominant supporter in Pokémon TCG history. Supporters are powerful trainer cards, limited to 1 use per turn. However, not all of them are on the same level. Some are weaker, outdated, or too complex to use effectively. At number 10 is Here Comes Team Rocket from the XY Evolutions set, which reveals both players' prize cards for the rest of the game. Evolutions became popular as a collectible set during the 2020 lockdowns, largely due to its nostalgic reprints of original cards like Pikachu and Charizard. Many older item cards were reprinted in the set, but had to be reclassified as supporter cards due to modern game rules. Here Comes Team Rocket originally appeared in the Team Rocket set as a trainer card, and it was already released as a supporter in the 2004 EX Team Rocket Return set. Although it wasn't especially relevant at the time, its inclusion on this list is influenced by the existence of another card from the same Aerotown map from XY Breakthrough. an item card that also turned prize cards face up and saw a decent amount of play. These plays helped players manage their prize cards more effectively and even access important cards usually locked away in the prize zone by chance. One such card was included in the deck that won the 2018 World Championship in the Masters Division. On the other hand, Here Comes Team Rocket was never used in competitive play. This was largely because another card, Town Map, was a superior alternative. It didn't give the same advantage to the opponent and didn't require using up the turn supporter slot just to view prize cards. The fact that Town Map was more efficient and not a supporter made Here Comes Team Rocket one of the weakest supporter cards ever made. Ranked 9th is Swordwood and Shieldbert from the Sword and Shield Battle Styles set. When used, you select a trainer card from your discard pile and show it to your opponent, who then decides whether you add it to your hand or draw 3 cards instead. This card is part of a broader trend in the Sword and Shield series that attempted to improve on the standard draw 3 format used since the Black and White era with Cherin, which was followed by Tierno in X and Y, and How in Sunday and Moon. Later cards like Hop, Friends in Galar, and Barry continued this trend, and upcoming sets will include a similar card named Nemona. However, Swordwood and Shieldbert were less effective because their bonus wasn't additive, it was an alternative. Other supporters like Avery, which draws 3 and forces the opponent to reduce their bench, or Birdkeeper, which switches your active Pokémon and draws a card, offered more value. Even Worker, which draws 3 and removes a stadium, saw some competitive use. Swordwood and Shieldbert's main flaw is that the opponent decides the outcome. Most of the time, the opponent will force you to draw 3 cards instead of reclaiming the trainer you want, especially if that card won't benefit you. This lack of control, combined with many better alternatives available at the same time, makes it one of the weakest supporter cards. At number 8 is Mum's Kindness from Diamond and Pearl, Majestic Dawn. This card simply allows you to draw 2 cards. By modern standards, drawing just 2 cards without any additional effect or condition is insufficient. Even when it was released in 2008, it was considered a low-tier card. Modern supporter cards often provide additional benefits or allow more flexible drawing options. During the Diamond and Pearl era, the game leaned more towards search-based strategies, and pure draw supporters were rarely printed or played. At the time, players still used cards from the EX era, such as Castaway from Crystal Guardians, which searched for various useful cards. Celio's Network from Fire Red and Leaf Green, which fetched almost any non-EX Pokémon, and Steven's Advice from Hidden Legends, which could draw cards based on the opponent's field. Among Diamond and Pearl era supporters, few focused solely on drawing, and those that did, like Mom's Kindness, failed to gain traction. Many players preferred Roseanne's Research from Secret Wonders, a supporter card that lets you search your deck for 2 cards in any combination of basic Pokémon and basic energy, and Beeb's Search from Mysterious Treasures, which requires you to put a card from your hand on top of your deck to then search for any Pokémon. With strong meta-relevant options like these, it's clear why Mom's Kindness didn't see play. This becomes even more obvious when you consider other Diamond and Pearl supporter cards that didn't see much use but still outclassed Mom's Kindness. For example, Team Galactic's Mars from Secret Wonders also draws 2 cards, but additionally forces the opponent to put a random card from their hand at the bottom of their deck. Another card, Professor Oak's Visit from the same set, draws 3 cards and then requires you to put 1 card from your hand at the bottom of your deck. Even though these cards were better, they still didn't become staples, meaning a weaker version like Mom's Kindness had little chance. Next, at number 7 is League Staff from Vivid Voltage. This card draws 2 cards, or 4 if Winden Stadium is in play. Winden Stadium heals 100 damage from a V Pokémon that evolves into a VMAX. Drawing 4 cards is powerful, which is why such effects usually have condition. A notable example is Coach Trainer from Unified Minds, which draws 4 cards if a tag team Pokémon is in the active spot. Otherwise, it draws only 2. Decks that focused on tag team Pokémon could consistently activate this effect. This type of conditional draw effect began in Sunday and Moon with Samson Oak, which drew 2 cards plus 2 more if both active Pokémon shared a type. Variants of this mechanic appeared in many forms later. For instance, Dan from Rebel Clash required winning rock, paper, scissors to draw 4. Schoolboy and Schoolgirl drew cards based on the opponent's prize card count, while Iskin replaced the tag team requirement with needing a Hisuian Pokémon in the active spot. The key issue with League Staff is that it requires a very specific card Winden Stadium to be in play, and only 4 copies of it can be in a deck. In contrast, Tag Team or Hisuian Pokémon can be included in larger numbers, making their effects easier to activate. This is even more problematic because, among all cards with conditional draw 4 effects, only Coach, Trainer and Schoolgirl ever saw significant play, as they could consistently meet their conditions. League Staff, however, depends on Winden Stadium, a card that never saw competitive use, making it essentially unusable due to its reliance on an underplayed card. At number 6 is Misty's Water Command from Hidden Fates. This supporter allows you to move any number of water energy from your Pokémon in play to any of your benched Horsey, Staryu, Starmie GX, Magikarp, Gyarados, or Lapras. To understand why this card is weak, it helps to analyze how its effect is structured and consider what a more effective version might look like. The most useful design for such a supporter would be one that allows you to move any type of energy between your Pokémon without restrictions. Limiting the effect by both energy type and eligible targets significantly reduces its potential utility. Do you like this personality? They found it easy to exploit, and from the moment this card was revealed, people argued that players could just memorize the heights of important cards in the meta to always guess the correct height of these Pokémon. While using less common Pokémon in Cedric Juniper decks could counter this, expecting players to study Pokémon heights was unrealistic. A more practical method was using information available during a match if a card was in play, in the discard pile, or in a hand. Players could simply read the height and always get it right. Combined with the fact that another card already existed with the same effect and wasn't relevant to the meta either, Cedric Juniper became one of the most unnecessary and ineffective supporter cards ever made. At number 4 is Brock's Training from Sunday and Moon Hidden Fates. This card lets you attach an energy from your hand to one of several specific Pokémon, like Geodude, Golem, Onix GX, Cubone, Rhyhorn, or Sudowoodo. Like Misty's Water Command, is too limited in use for such a small benefit. Just a few sets later, the Sword and Shield expansion introduced B, a supporter that could attach a basic energy from your hand to one of your benched Pokémon. The only slight advantages Brock's Training had were that it could attach to active Pokémon and wasn't limited to basic energy, but considering how weak the listed Pokémon were, this didn't help much. B itself wasn't played because using a supporter just to attach energy wasn't effective. Like Misty's Water Command, Brock's Training had a weak effect and forced the use of unplayable Pokémon. Unlike Misty's card, the Pokémon on Brock's Training never saw any use, making it even worse. At number 3 is Erica from the 2019 Sunday and Moon Cosmic Eclipse set. When played, both players may draw up to 3 cards, with the player using the card drawing first. Erica was an odd inclusion in this set because most other supporters featured characters from the Sun and Moon games, cards that didn't usually brought new mechanics or effects. Erica, however, reused an effect from a trainer card originally released in Gym Heroes in 2000, based on the same character from the original games. These kinds of nostalgic reprints are usually found in special sets like Evolutions or Celebrations, or when several cards follow a similar theme, usually because they were from Japanese sets that weren't fully released internationally. That wasn't the case here. Erica was the only one like this in Cosmic Eclipse, making it feel out of place. In terms of gameplay, Erica wasn't completely outclassed in terms of power level, but most decks at the time preferred supporter cards focused on searching, such as Guzma and Hala, which allowed you to find a stadium, and, if you discarded 2 cards, also grab a Pokémon tool or special energy. Another popular option was Green's Exploration, which let you search for 2 trainer cards if you had no Pokémon with abilities in play. Decks not using search-based cards often relied on supporters like Welder and Cynthia and Caitlyn. Welder attached 2 fire energy from hand to a Pokémon and drew 3 cards. Cynthia and Caitlyn retrieved a supporter from the discard pile, and if a card was discarded from hand, drew 3 cards, though the discarded card couldn't be the one retrieved. So while Erica wasn't weak, it simply didn't fit the design or impact needed at the time. They had an easy time using it. One argument made as soon as the card was revealed was that players could just memorize the heights of relevant meta cards to always guess the height of these Pokémon correctly. Although Cedric Juniper decks could counter this by including more obscure Pokémon, expecting players to memorize Pokémon heights seemed unrealistic. A more practical method was simply using information available during a match if you or your opponent had a copy of the card in play, in the discard pile, or in hand. You could read the height directly and always guess correctly. All these problems, combined with the fact that a card already existed with the same effect and was not even relevant in the meta, made Cedric Juniper one of the most unnecessary and useless supporter cards ever printed. At number 4 is Brock's Training from Sunday and Moon, Hidden Fates. This card lets you attach an energy card from your hand to one of your Geodude, Graveler, Golem, Onix GX, Cubone, Rhyhorn, Rhydon, or Sudowoodo. Like Misty's Water command, which was previously discussed, Brock's Training is too limited for too little benefit. Just a few sets after its release, the Sword and Shield expansion introduced B, a supporter that attaches a basic energy card from your hand to one of your bench Pokémon. The only advantages Brock's Training had over B were being able to attach to active Pokémon and not being limited to basic energy cards. But considering how irrelevant the Pokémon supported by Brock's Training were, this wasn't a significant benefit. What made it worse was that B saw no play either, as using a supporter to attach energy was generally a poor strategy. Like Misty's Water command, Brock's Training combined a weak effect with restrictive conditions that required using unviable Pokémon. Unlike Misty's card, none of the Pokémon in Brock's Training were ever used competitively, making it even worse and securing its spot on this list. At number 3 is Erica from the 2019 set Sunday and Moon, Cosmic Eclipse. When played, both players may draw up to 3 cards, with the player who played the card drawing first. Erica was in a strange position at release, as most other supporter cards in Cosmic Eclipse featured characters from the Sun and Moon games. Those that didn't either featured characters relevant to the games or had entirely new effects. Erica didn't fit either category. A nearly identical card featuring the same character had already appeared back in the Gym Heroes set in 2000, allowing both players to draw up to 3 cards. Normally, these nostalgic pseudo-reprints appear in special sets like Evolutions or Celebrations, or in sets with multiple similar cards, often due to leftover cards from Japanese mini-sets or promos not released elsewhere. That didn't apply to Erica, as hers was the only card like this in the set, making her inclusion feel out of place. In terms of gameplay, Erica wasn't far below the power level of other supporter cards at the time. Many decks used search-based supporters like Guzma and Hala, which let players search their deck for a stadium card and if 2 cards were discarded to play it. They could also search for a Pokémon tool, Special Energy. Another popular option was Green's Exploration, which allowed searching for 2 trainer cards if there were no Pokémon with abilities in play. Decks that didn't use these search-based supporters often used ones like Welder and Cynthia and Caitlyn. Welder allowed attaching up to 2 fire energy cards from hand to a Pokémon, then drawing 3 cards. Cynthia and Caitlyn let you retrieve a supporter card, except another Cynthia and Caitlyn, from the discard pile, and draw 3 cards if you discarded a card from your hand, though the discarded card couldn't be the one you were retrieving. So, in terms of raw performance, Erica fell short. Do you like this personality? Erica's card wasn't initially that bad. What made it problematic was that it allowed your opponent to draw cards too. In the Pokémon TCG, any card that benefits your opponent must either be extremely powerful for the user to outweigh that drawback, or end the game immediately before the opponent can take advantage of it. Simply drawing 3 cards isn't strong enough to meet those standards. At number 2 is Riley from Sword and Shield, Lost Origin. When you use this card, you reveal the top 5 cards of your deck to your opponent, who then chooses 2 of them to discard, and you keep the remaining cards. While this may not seem terrible at first, a closer look reveals why it's considered one of the worst. Cards that let you look at the top few cards of your deck and make choices tend to be good in the game's history. For example, Sage's Training from Heart Gold and Soul Silver, Undaunted let you look at 5 cards, keep 2, and discard the rest. It wasn't universally useful, but many decks that liked consistency or had cards they wanted in the discard could benefit. A more recent example is Colress's Experiment from the same set as Riley, which lets you look at 5 cards and keep 3, sending the rest to the Lost Zone. While the Lost Zone is more punishing than the discard pile, since those cards are gone for the game, many powerful cards work with it, making the effect useful. Riley, however, doesn't just pale in comparison, it's nearly unplayable. If you got to choose which cards to keep and only revealed them to your opponent, it might have been serviceable. But giving your opponent the power to choose what you discard risks losing key cards or important matchups, and also gives them insight into your deck. That makes it one of the worst supporter cards, as it can directly hurt your strategy. At number 1 is Imakuni from X and Y, Generations. Its effect is simply to confuse your active Pokémon. Confusion forces you to flip a coin to attack, and if you get tails, the Pokémon takes 30 damage instead. To understand this card, it's important to know that X and Y, Generations was a special set released for Pokémon's 20th anniversary in 2016, mainly featuring Kanto Pokémon and reprinted items from the X and Y era. It wasn't sold in booster boxes but in promo packs, and included both competitive and novelty cards. Some new cards from the set, like Revitalize Air, an item that retrieves 2 grass-type Pokémon from the discard pile, were actually useful in competitive decks. Imakuni, on the other hand, was clearly a joke card with no competitive value. Looking at its effect in context with the game's 5 status conditions: poison, burn, sleep, paralysis, and confusion. Confusion is arguably one of the least helpful effects to use on your own Pokémon. Imakuni actively harms your own gameplay, making it completely useless in serious play. Confusion, as a status condition, makes a Pokémon flip a coin before attacking. If the result is heads, the attack proceeds normally. If it's tails, 3 damage counters are placed on the Pokémon, and the attack fails. None of the special conditions are typically desirable, but there are situations where applying one to your own Pokémon can be beneficial. Some abilities require a Pokémon to be affected by a status condition to unleash stronger attacks. Others might allow copying special conditions to the opponent's Pokémon. For instance, if a card like Imakuni is used on such a Pokémon, the opponent's active Pokémon could also become confused. Still, Imakuni is widely considered one of the worst supporter cards ever made. Confusing your own Pokémon essentially reduces your attack success rate to 50% and risks self-inflicted damage, and even the copy abilities aren't worth the effort, especially when opponents can easily remove the condition by retreating. However, Imakuni's design was intentionally poor. Though this card marked his first appearance in the West, Japanese players were already familiar with the character due to his presence in many promotional events from 1997 to 2002 and over 10 card appearances. One such card is Imakuni's Doduo, which appeared in the Generations set after the release of X and Y evolutions. Imakuni was clearly included as a joke, which made it easy to categorize him among the worst cards. In contrast, Level X Pokémon were unique in that they could be played on top of Pokémon of the same name, granting them additional abilities and a small HP boost. Among them, Porygon Z Level X is particularly notable. It lacks any attack, but has 2 powerful Poképowers. When played, Mode Crash discards all special energy attached to the opponent's Pokémon, a situational but useful effect. More importantly, Decode allows the player to choose any 2 cards from their deck and place them on top, enabling easy access with any draw method. It can be used every turn, making Porygon Z Level X part of a very consistent deck in formats lacking strong draw options. This earns it the number 10 spot. Number 9 goes to Magnezone Level X, which benefited from a range of strong Magnezone cards. Its Electric Trans ability lets players move lightning or metal energies among their Pokémon freely. Its attack, Gyro Ball, does 80 damage and causes paralysis, though it requires discarding 1 metal and 1 lightning energy. Paralysis prevents the opponent from attacking or retreating for a turn, making it highly disruptive. Initially, its only available Magnezone was from Diamond and Pearl, which allowed free retreat for Pokémon with Metal Energy and had an attack that scaled with Metal Energy attached. Magnezone level X gained significant strength with the Stormfront expansion, which added 2 new Magnezones. The Metal-type version could search for energy cards using its Poké, Power, and the Lightning-type version provided consistent energy acceleration. These additions greatly improved Magnezone level X's viability. Is this conversation helpful so far? Super Connectivity allowed you to attach a Lightning or Metal Energy to your active Pokémon, but at the cost of placing 1 damage counter on the Pokémon receiving the energy. With 2 Magnezone cards in play, this ability could be used twice per turn, enabling Magnezone LVX to paralyze the opponent's active Pokémon every turn without using the usual hand attachment. In addition to its strong ability, Magnezone also had the useful Gyro Ball attack, dealing 60 damage and allowing both players to switch their active Pokémon with a benched one, giving strategic control over the battlefield. For a while, these were the main features of Magnezone decks until the Triumphant set introduced Magnezone Prime, a powerful card for the deck. Its magnetic draw ability let the player draw until they had 6 cards in hand, providing consistency, while the Lost Burn attack allowed the player to put any number of attached energy into the Lost Zone to deal 50 damage per energy. The Lost Zone permanently removes cards from the game. Interestingly, by the time Magnezone Prime was released, both it and Magnezone LVX had the same HP, removing the usual benefit of increased HP from a level X. While Magnezone decks were never the top in any format, they were highly creative and solid, earning their spot on this list. At number 8 is a card central to one of the most unique deck types ever printed in the Pokémon TCG, Arceus LVX from the Arceus expansion during the Platinum era. This set featured numerous Arceus cards that allowed players to build a unique deck with many different attackers. Unlike most decks, there was no limit to how many Arceus cards could be included, allowing the use of every type. Each type had a regular Arceus and 3 different Arceus LV. X cards, all colorless but with a multi-type Pokébody, which changed their type to match the Arceus they evolved from. This gave the deck flexibility to adapt to different matchups. The version on this list also featured a second Pokébody, Omniscient, which allowed it to use any attack from any Arceus in play, provided the correct energy was attached. This gave the deck a wide range of attack options, making it one of the most interesting decks ever. Gengar Lilv X takes 7th place, benefiting greatly from the ability to use various strong Gengar cards. In a format dominated by level X Pokémon, its level down Poké Power was a powerful offensive move, letting the player return an opponent's level X card to their deck. Gengar LV X also had a strong attack, Compound Pain, which placed 30 damage on all of the opponent's Pokémon that already had damage counters, costing 3 energy. This worked well with Gengar from Rising Rivals, which could move 1 damage counter per turn with its Curse Poké Power. Shadow Skip dealt 60 damage and placed 10 damage on an opponent's benched Pokémon, helping spread damage across the board. Although Gengar from Stormfront was older, it became viable again when paired with Gengar Lil VX. Its fainting spell Poké Power gave a 50% chance to knock out the attacking Pokémon when Gengar was knocked out. Shadow Room could place 3 damage counters on any Pokémon, or 6 if it had a Poké Power. Lastly, Gengar Prime from Triumphant provided yet another attack, Cursed Drop Witch, placed 4 damage counters anywhere on the opponent's field, helping set up for Compound Pain. All of these options made Gengar Lil X one of the most versatile and impactful cards of its time. In 6th place is the oldest card on the list, Gardevoir LV X, released in Secret Wonders. The first Diamond and Pearl expansions introduced a card that added utility to an already strong archetype through its teleportation Poké Power, which allowed switching the level X card with a bench Pokémon if it was active, or with the active Pokémon if it was on the bench. Its Bring Down attack, while not the main focus, had niche uses by knocking out the Pokémon in play with the lowest remaining HP, including potentially the player's own Pokémon. This made it effective finishing off previously active Pokémon that had retreated or been switched out. The Secret Wonders set also featured a regular version of the same Pokémon, which many players consider one of the strongest decks ever. Its telepass, Poké Power, allowed copying a supporter card from the opponent's discard pile, effectively enabling the use of 2 supporter cards per turn. The text clarified that only 1 telepass could be used per turn due to its strength. Its Psychic Lock attack dealt 60 damage and prevented the opponent from using Poké Powers on their next turn, severely limiting their options. The Level X version was a strong addition to this deck and contributed to winning the 2008 World Championship. In 5th place is Regigigas Level X, a powerful card with a unique strategy. Its Sacrifice Poké Power allowed the player to knock out one of their own Pokémon to attach 2 basic energy cards from the discard pile to Regigigas and remove 8 damage counters from it. This helped set up Regigigas while also keeping it alive. The Pokémon sacrificed were typically support cards that had already served their purpose, freeing up bench space. Its Giga Blaster attack, though costly at 4 energies, did 100 damage, discarded a card from the opponent's deck and one from their hand, and prevented its reuse the next turn. That wasn't an issue, as the regular Regigigas could still attack effectively. Dragoff did 30 damage and could switch the defending Pokémon with one from the bench, while Giga Impact dealt 80 damage but couldn't be used the next turn. The strategy was simple. Set up 1 strong Regigigas Level X and maintain it by sacrificing support Pokémon, making it a notable entry on this list. At number 4 is Flygon Level X from Rising Rivals. Its Wind Erosion Pokébody discarded the top card of the opponent's deck between turns, possibly removing key resources. Extreme Attack dealt 150 damage to any opposing Level X, whether active or benched. Flygon and its pre-evolutions were central to many decks due to their colorless typing and utility, especially from Rainbow Float, which granted free retreat to Pokémon sharing an energy type with Flygon. One of the most effective strategies didn't even involve attacking with Flygon itself, but used the Memory Berry Poké tool, which let it access attacks from earlier stages, including Trapinch from Secret Wonders. Trapinch could either switch the opponent's active Pokémon with one from the bench, or deal 10 damage while preventing retreat. Combined with Wind Erosion, this created a control strategy aimed at depleting the opponent's deck instead of taking 6 prize cards. This creative approach and Flygon Level X's versatility earned it a well-deserved 4th place. At number 3 is Garchomp C Level X. Its Healing Breath Poké power activated when it evolved, fully healing all SP Pokémon the player had in play, making it very difficult for opponents to secure knockouts. SP attackers that could knock out opponents in one hit included Garchomp C Level X, which wasn't just a support card, but one of the deck's strongest offensive options. Its Dragon Rush attack dealt 80 damage to any Pokémon, and the cost discarding 2 energy became much easier to meet with the introduction of double colorless energy in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. This card fulfilled the entire requirement with 1 special energy, and when paired with Energy Gain, a tool card exclusive to SP Pokémon that reduced colorless energy costs, it became both powerful and efficient. Before double colorless energy was released, Garchomp C Level X was mainly used for its Poké Power, or powered up using Bronzong G's Galactic Switch, which let players transfer energy between SP Pokémon at the cost of placing 10 damage on Bronzong G. Another way to meet energy needs at the time was Upper Energy from Rising Rivals, which acted like double colorless energy, but only when the player was behind on prize cards. Once double colorless energy entered the format, Upper Energy lost relevance. Since its release, Garchomp C Level X was part of top-tier decks, a status confirmed by its 2010 World Championship win, and it was later included in the 25th anniversary celebration set. Coming in at number 2 is Uxie Level X, not due to its attacking strength, but because of the consistency it provided. Its trade-off Poker Power allowed players to look at the top 2 cards of their deck, take one, and put the other on the bottom. This could be used once per turn, offering significant card advantage and helping players execute their strategies. Its base form, Uxie, also played a major role with its setup Poker Power, which let players draw cards until they had 7 in hand when it was played, making it a key draw engine in many decks. Even modern cards rarely match its strength, Crobat V, for example, only draws up to 6 cards and can be used just once, while also giving up 2 prize cards if knocked out. The combination of Uxie and Uxie level X rightfully earns second place on this list. The top spot goes to Luxray GL level X. Its bright look Poke power let players force their opponent to switch their active Pokemon with one from the bench, a mechanic known as gusting, which has always been a vital part of the game, paired with cards like Poke Turn, which allowed the player to return an SP Pokemon and all its attached cards to their hand. Bright Look could be reused by evolving another Luxray GL or reusing the same one. Similar abilities have been reprinted since Essek, as in Lycanroc GX and Umbreon VMAX and were heavily played, but Luxray GL level X faced no competition in its time. It also had a solid attack in Flash Impact, which did 60 damage quickly, useful for finishing off weaker Pokemon or setting up future knockouts. The SP engine again helped with efficiency by using energy gain to reduce its cost. Even back then, Luxray GL level X was considered the strongest level X card, with 2 World Championship wins in 2009 and 2010, and it too was included in the Celebrations set. Throughout the history of the Pokemon TCG, various gimmick mechanics have been introduced, though many early ones failed to make a lasting impact. That changed with the release of EX Ruby and Sapphire, which brought Pokemon EX to the game. These powerful cards dominated the meta during their time and shaped the format around them, earning a place on this list. We'll be looking at some of the strongest Pokemon cards, starting with number 10, Blaziken X from the EX Team Magma vs Team Aqua expansion. This card demonstrated why the evolution system in the Pokemon TCG was so impactful. It evolved from the same Stage 1 as a previously powerful card, which significantly influenced the metagame. With 150 horsepower, Blaziken X was already a top-tier attacker, but its Volcanic Ash, attack requiring 2 fire and 2 colorless energy, could deal 100 damage to any of the opponent's Pokemon by discarding 2 attached energy. At the time, this was enough to knock out almost any Pokemon in play, including other Pokemon X, giving a major advantage in prize cards. Its strength was enhanced by the Blaziken from EX Ruby and Sapphire, which could move fire energy from the discard pile to benched Pokemon. This synergy allowed players to continuously power up Blaziken X and use Volcanic Ash for consecutive turns, often securing a favorable prize trade. This strategy led to a second-place finish at the 2004 World Championships, though its influence faded in the years that followed. At number 9 is Vaporeon X from EX Delta Species. Upon release, it quickly became one of the strongest Pokemon X. Its attacks weren't remarkable, but its Poke, Power, Evolutionary Swirl stood out. When it evolved, it forced the opponent to shuffle their hand into their deck and draw only 4 cards. This kind of disruption was rare and powerful, especially in an era where large hand sizes were common. The effect was even more impactful after the rotation of Rocket's admin in 2007, which had previously been the main hand disruption card. As a result, decks often used evolution Pokemon as an engine for disruption, with Vaporeon as the centerpiece. Vaporeon X earned second place at the 2006 World Championships, and won the title in 2007, the only years it was legal. However, its success was partly due to the strength of the other evolution cards, which kept it from ranking higher. At number 8 is Jirachi X from EX Crystal Guardians, released near the end of the X era. It gained recognition in the 2007 and 2008 formats thanks to its Shield Beam attack, which did 30 damage for 1 Psychic and 1 colorless energy, and prevented opponents from using Pokepowers on their next turn. While the effect was strong, it became even better because of Jirachi's Pokebody. Shield Beam's cost was reduced to just 1 Psychic Energy if the opponent had a Pokemon X or Stage 2 Pokemon in play. This made Jirachi a powerful early game disruption tool. It helped win the World Championships in both 2007 and 2008. In 2007, it was used to slow down opponents while building up a board. In 2008, it served as an offensive threat that triggered Scramble Energy, allowing a shift into a strong attack while locking the opponent out of using Pokepowers for the rest of the game. At number 7 is Metagross EX from the EX Emerald expansion. This card featured a powerful combination of strong attacks and an even stronger Pokebody, making it nearly flawless. Its Pokebody was especially impactful, disabling the Poke powers of all non-EX Pokemon while it was active. This shut down key support cards like Pidgeot and Magcargo, which were crucial to deck consistency in the 2005 modified format. Its pure power attack placed 3 damage counters on the opponent's Pokemon for just 2 colorless energy, and Skykick did 60 damage, with an additional 30 if the opponent had resistance to fighting, effectively bypassing that resistance. Metagross EX was the pinnacle of Turn 2 deck archetypes, built around strong stage 1 lines with minimal other Pokemon. After going undefeated at a regional championship in 2005, Turn 2 decks dominated the season. At the 2005 National Championship, Metagross EX won in all 3 age divisions, though it missed winning in the Masters division due to players preparing counters to it. After that peak, its performance declined, placing it at number 7. At number 6 is Rayquaza EX from the EX Dragon Frontiers expansion. This card boasted 2 powerful attacks and an even better Pokebody. Its special circuit attack dealt 30 damage to any opponent's Pokemon for 1 lightning and 1 colorless energy, increased to 50 if the target had a Poke, Power, or Pokebody. Sky High Claws did 70 damage for 2 lightning and 2 colorless energy, which would normally be too costly, but its Rage Aura Pokebody allowed it to ignore all colorless energy in its attack cost if you had more prize cards remaining than your opponent, turning it into a major offensive threat. Rayquaza EX was key to the deck that won the 2007 World Championship and was even featured on the packaging of its retail version. Its fame comes less from standard competitive formats and more from the EX era format, spanning from EX Ruby and Sapphire to EX Power Keepers. Though this format was never official in certain regions, it was played in Japan, and in unofficial tournaments today, Rayquaza EX is a central card in one of the most dominant decks known as Argon. At number 5 is Rocket Sneasel EX from the EX Team Rocket Returns expansion. Despite modest base damage, its attacks Dragoff and Dark Ring were very strong, especially when powered up by Darkness Energy and R Energy. Dragoff was useful in early turns to disrupt strategies or weaken key opposing Pokemon. Dark Ring started at 30 damage but increased by 10 for each Darkness-type Pokemon in play, with added boosts from Darkness-based energy cards. Rocket Sneasel EX was the main attacker in the Dragtrode archetype, which combined Dark Dragonite for moving energy between Pokemon, and Dark Electrode for accelerating energy from the deck, both also from the same expansion. This synergy created an aggressive and difficult-to-counter strategy. While it didn't perform well at the 2005 World Championships, partly due to Metagross EX being a hard counter, the Dragtrode deck was a top-tier force in the 2006 modified format, achieving multiple top 32 finishes and cementing its legacy. At number 4 is Electrode EX from the EX Fire Red and Leaf Green expansion. It wasn't particularly known for its attacks, which were relatively weak, but its Poke, Power, Extra Energy Bomb was considered one of the strongest of the entire EX era. It played a key role in the championship strategies at Worlds in both 2006 and 2007, and consistently achieved top finishes at national championships globally. Additionally, there was a 2006 deck known as Mulock, which included Wobbuffet and Jinx, and is often considered one of the best decks ever created. However, it was never viable for competitive play due to the length of games, preventing it from achieving notable results. Mew stands out as the most versatile card on this list, having been used in top-tier strategies throughout its entire period of legality, solidifying its status as the best Pokémon EX of all time. It played a key role in the championship strategies at the World Championships in 2006 and 2007, and also achieved top results at national championships around the world. Additionally, there was a deck in 2006 known as Mulock, which included Wobbuffet and Jinx, and is often regarded as one of the best decks ever created. However, it wasn't viable for tournaments because the games took too long, so it never had the opportunity to prove itself with strong results. Mew stands out as the most versatile card on this list, having been used in top-level strategies throughout its entire period of legality, firmly establishing itself as the greatest Pokémon EX of all time.